For a team that just came fresh off winning the championship and that's once again primed to win it all this year, it's quite fascinating how the OKC Thunder are still currently operating with a relatively cheap roster, with their payroll being around $10 million under the tax line this season. Though things are about to change a few months from now, with J-Dub and Chet Holmgren's max extension starting to kick in, together with Shai's already massive contract, we're looking at a situation wherein in 2 years' time, the Thunder could be facing a payroll and luxury tax combination that would exceed $500 million if they run back their entire roster for the 2026 to 2027 season. Well, it's a given that OKC will be a second apron team and will carry a deep luxury tax penalty beginning next season, but even if they do win the championship for a second time this year, it's very unlikely that they would let their payroll get that high due to the excessive tax and second apron penalties they would have to face in a few years. We'll talk about those penalties in a while, but the point is, the Thunder will most likely make changes to their roster over the summer, and for months now, many have been speculating that OKC might have to part ways with either one of Isaiah Hardenstein or Lu Dort this offseason because both hold significant team options, with Hart holding a $28.5 million team option and Dort holding a slightly smaller $18.2 million team option. Basically, letting go of at least one of them would be the Thunder's easiest path towards savings, but then it's also unlikely that the team will simply let either one go. First off, in the case of Hardenstein, as the team's starting center, he continues to be an elite rim protector, a fantastic rebounder, and a monster finisher at the basket who's been a very good fit next to Chet Holmgren at the front court. Hart's also been a solid hub on the offensive end who's an above-average passer for his size, and it also happens to rank 8th in defensive field goal percentage among all players to contest at least 8 shots per game this season. Injuries have limited him this year, but when he's played, Hart's been incredibly impactful, with the Thunder having a 38-8 record with him available this season. Then, in the case of Lu Dort, has been more banged up than usual this year and is averaging the lowest minute count he's had since his rookie year, but his defense still remains elite. The Thunder have a younger version of him in Cason Wallace, but Dort's ability to shift between quicker guards and bulkier wings on a nightly basis when guarding opposing teams' number 1 options, I think has gone massively underrated. Well, here are Dort's 5 most defended players this season in terms of partial possessions. The list includes KD, Anthony Edwards, Jamal Murray, Donovan Mitchell, and Danny Avdija. And the numbers don't lie. Outside of KD, no one else has shot more than 50% from the field, and aside from Ant, no one else has shot more than 30% from deep when defended by Lu Dort. Ultimately, as a Thunder fan, the only thing I can do is speculate as to how both Hart and Dort situations will be dealt with this offseason. But what options does Sam Presti and the front office actually have with both players? And is it even possible for the Thunder to keep both Dort and Hartenstein well into the foreseeable future? But before talking about what I think would be the front office's likeliest options with Dort and Hartenstein, I think we need to look into a couple of roster building obstacles which makes the option of keeping both players long-term very challenging in the first place. First, there is the repeater tax, which is a financial penalty set at a rate that is much higher than the standard luxury tax. And this is a penalty given to teams that exceed the luxury tax threshold for a period of 3 years in a 4-year window. And right now, the Thunder are set to pay the luxury tax beginning next season up until the 2028 to 2029 season, which is 3 straight years, meaning they would already be subject to the repeater tax as soon as the 2029 to 2030 season. But with that said, in the past, the Thunder's ownership group has shelled out tens of millions of dollars in luxury tax payments for OKC teams that are way worse than this current championship roster they have. So I really don't have any worries about ownership paying some sort of repeater tax as long as the Thunder continues to win titles. Although this is still a business and you would still probably expect the team to do something in terms of saving dollars. Though a bigger constraint that the Thunder probably would like to avoid is the second apron, because teams whose salaries fall under the second apron for 2 years within a 4-year window are going to be subject to some harsh roster building penalties, which include being prevented from aggregating player salaries in a trade, being prevented from using trade exceptions, being prevented from acquiring players from the buyout market, just to name a few. But more notably, a team who falls under the second apron for 2 years within the 4-year window will also have their first-round draft pick 7 years into the future frozen, making it unusable even in trades. And considering OKC's future is projected to be heavily reliant on draft picks to replenish their roster, this penalty could somehow affect the Thunder to a reasonable degree. And right now, what immediately sticks out is that if the Thunder pick up both Dort and Hart's team options, the team will already exceed the second apron by around $22 million next season. And again, during the 2027 to 2028 season, the Thunder are set to exceed the second apron by around $21 million, even with Ihart and Dort's contracts already off the team's payroll. This means the Thunder are already primed to face second apron penalties in a couple more years if they can't trim down that payroll over the next 2 years. So now, this is where Ihart and Dort's team options come into play. First, let's talk about Ihart's massive $28.5 million team option. Well, the most straightforward choice here for OKC, especially if the main priority is to save money, is obviously to just decline Ihart's team option and let him walk this offseason. By doing this, the Thunder would immediately end up being $6 million under the second apron for next season, and therefore potentially delaying their entry into second apron territory by 1 more year. Obviously, Ihart raises the Thunder's ceiling with just how he unlocks different lineup combinations for the team. However, the argument for this option is that Coach Daigneault has shown that he isn't afraid to switch up lineups based on matchups. You could also argue that Sam Presti has obviously been planning for a role without Hardenstein. J. Will has been a pretty reliable backup big for a couple seasons now, and his recent extension that runs through 2028 gives the Thunder some options to replace some of the things that Hardenstein brings to the table. On top of that, OKC just drafted big man Thomas Sorber, who's conveniently projected to be an Ihart type of player as well. Sure, even in an optimistic view, Sorber wouldn't be as good as Ihart immediately, but if he could give the Thunder around 60 to 70% of what Ihart brings, then maybe the added development of the roster, especially that of Chet Holmgren, could be enough to offset the potential loss of Hardenstein. Basically, straight up declining Ihart's team option keeps the rest of the Thunder roster intact potentially up until the 2028 season, and if you're wondering, this option also brings the Thunder's tax bill from $175 million down to just $39 million next season. Now, moving on to option number 2, another thing the Thunder can do is pick up Ihart's team option for next season and then simply not re-sign him beyond that. The idea behind this option is simply to have Ihart for a third straight year to maximize OKC's chances of winning, especially if a three-peat is a possibility, and then they simply just let him walk by the summer of 2027 with the idea of shedding depth and saving money for the next couple years. Well, as it appears, this option also increases the possibility of the Thunder signing Lu Dort to a long-term extension that goes beyond next season. Because if the Thunder let Hardenstein walk by the summer of 2027, what happens is, even if the Thunder signs Lu Dort to a long-term extension worth around $20 million per year, there is a possibility that the team could stay under the second apron at least during the 2027 to 2028 season. That is, provided they make some other moves, which would most likely involve trading Alex Caruso and his $20 million per year salary, and also not picking up Kenrich Williams' $7.2 million player option this summer, as well as J. Will's $7.7 million option for the 2028 season. But then, if the goal is to keep Hardenstein long-term, probably the most practical option would be to decline his team option for next season and instead sign him to a brand new extension. Well, ideally, the goal here is straight up to offer Ihart the guarantee of a new long-term contract in exchange for him potentially signing at a lower annual value than what he would be worth as a free agent. This is something Sam Presti has done in recent years with a bunch of players like Dort, Aaron Wiggins, Isaiah Joe, and most recently AJ Mitchell. The problem for the front office is that it's going to be hard to argue against Ihart's current value, which is why he would still likely demand something around the $25 million range, as it's just the market rate for above-average starting centers. Similar to Miles Turner, who's making $27 million a year, Jarrett Allen is going to be at $30 million per year in his upcoming extension, and even with Jakob Poeltl, who's making $26 million annually. Also, the trend right now is that teams seem to be willing to pay a premium for size. The Lakers, for example, who project to have nearly $50 million in cap space, and the Clippers, who project to have $67 million available for next season, would probably love to sign Hardenstein to a contract with an even higher annual salary, not just to improve their team, but also to potentially weaken the Thunder. So if OKC wants to keep Ihart long-term, they would still have to sign him at market rate. Negotiations will be happening, and I think a reasonable middle ground would be around $23 to $24 million a year. And while that's still a massive amount, it's still a bit lower than his current salary, and that amount still saves OKC nearly $50 million in salary plus taxes compared to what they would have to pay if they signed him to around $28 million per year. This third option also seems to make the most sense for both parties. For the Thunder, signing Ihart long-term gives them the benefit of taking his contract through his age 31 or age 32 season, which is basically until the end of his prime. And for Hardenstein, accepting a long-term offer from the Thunder this offseason would be a huge guarantee compared to him gambling and expecting to make more money in the free agent market. But what about Lu Dort and his $18.2 million team option? Well, just like with iHeart, the most straightforward option for OKC in terms of savings is to just decline Dort's team option and let him walk this offseason. This option obviously makes it easier for the Thunder to take in an extension for Hardenstein, and it also clears the way for a new contract for Cason Wallace, who's also eligible to sign an extension this summer. But based on the Thunder's operational history, if they would choose to let Dort go, what they would probably do is pick up his team option and trade him instead to extract assets from another team. However, I think it's unlikely the Thunder will just let Dort go or trade him at all. Sure, OKC now has an abundance of all defense level guys, all of whom can also space the floor. The thing is, while the Thunder may be deep enough at the wing to remain at their current level without Dort, I think losing him would probably still hurt them both on the court and in the locker room. As a reigning all-defense first-team player, Dort's defensive hustle and intensity, even if it doesn't always show in the box score, sets the tone for the whole team. And sure, Dort's scoring is down this year as his 8.4 point per game average is his lowest since his rookie year. But then we also have to take into consideration the fact that Dort is also playing his lowest minutes and taking the least number of shot attempts he's had since his rookie season. But despite that, Dort's other stats such as his steals and blocks, his rebounds and assists per game, and even his 3-point percentage are still at par with his career averages. But more importantly, while Dort may be inconsistent with his scoring, he's still been consistent with that one thing he's expected to be good at, and that is playing elite defense. So if the team chooses to keep Dort long-term, we go to the next option, which is declining his team option and instead signing him to a long-term extension. Though just like with iHeart, there's probably no viable way Dort takes a massive pay cut in any extension. In fact, he'd probably be looking at a race if he hits the open market, as indicated by him signing with an agency notorious for playing hardball with teams and getting every last dollar for their clients. Well, the annual salary for defensive-minded starting-level wings like Dort who are at least fifth options in offense has also significantly increased over the years, so I think Dort's annual salary floor will likely be in the low 20 million range, similar to players like Herb Jones or Aaron Nesmith who are earning around 20 to 22 million per year. But I think it also wouldn't be surprising if a team offered Dort an even higher starting salary in a short-term deal with a team option in the end just to steal him from the Thunder. So I think for OKC to keep Dort, they would most likely have to sign him at least to a flat 20 million per year. Again, the only problem is the Thunder might not have the appetite to pay him that much while juggling an already complicated payroll situation, which leads us to the possible last option, which is that the Thunder just picks up Dort's team option next season and then just figures out his future by the summer of 2027. While Cason Wallace's upcoming extension is a complicating factor in Dort's long-term future in OKC. However, this shouldn't impact Dort in the upcoming season since Cason's extension won't kick in until the 2027 to 2028 season. In the end, someone between Dort and Alex Caruso most likely would have to go for the Thunder to accommodate Cason Wallace's next contract, but that is a decision they can deal with a year from now. Either way, the team could sign Dort to a new extension between July 2026 and June 2027. So frankly speaking for the Thunder, it doesn't even have to be a decision between either iHeart or Dort because if they want to, the team can just keep both and endure all tax and second apron penalties that come with a massive payroll. After all, if there's ever a time for OKC to go deep into the second apron and spend big, it's now with their current championship window while having the MVP in his prime. But at the end of the day, roster building in the NBA is still a business. In the ideal scenario that the front office can somehow re-sign iHeart to $23 million a year and Dort to $20 million a year this summer, then the Thunder's tax bill for next season would be around $110 million. That's probably a reasonable payment for a single year, but the problem is in 2027 to 2028, this is when SGA's Supermax deal kicks in and when Cason's new contract comes into play. By that time, the Thunder's tax bill could simply go beyond $250 million, which amount is projected to get even bigger in the following years, and I just don't see any NBA ownership group paying for that much, not when they can save around $50 to $75 million a year by moving on from one of Hardenstein or Dort. Well, only Sam Presti could be certain about what's going to happen, but one thing is for sure, and that is how much the Thunder can accomplish in their upcoming run in the 2026 playoffs should determine what the front office will do and how different the Thunder's roster will look next season. Thank you guys if you made it this far into the video, but what do you think will be the Thunder's decision regarding iHeart and Dort's situation? Feel free to drop your thoughts in the comment section below, and again, if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing as well. Again, this has been Real Balls, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.